A few months ago, I was looking through some of my older videos. At first, it felt nostalgic. I could see how much had changed over the years. Different editing styles, different cameras, different ideas. But the longer I watched, the more I noticed things I had completely missed at the time. Looking back, there are a handful of lessons I wish I had learned much earlier. Lessons that would have saved my time, frustration, and a lot of unnecessary mistakes. So in this video, I want to share a few of them with you. One of the biggest mistakes I used to make was believing that exposure was something I could fix later in post. The problem is that color grading is not magic. It can improve an image, but it cannot always recover information that was never captured properly in the first place. That realization changed the way I expose my footage. Since I shoot on the Sony 6400, I usually use S-Log2 instead of S-Log3. The 6400 records 8-bit footage, and while S-Log3 offers more dynamic range, it can be harder to grade and may introduce issues like banding and unstable colors. S-Log2 gives me a safer balance between dynamic range and flexibility. Once you choose a log profile, exposure becomes even more important. I usually overexpose S-Log2 by around 2 stops, but I don't blindly rely on the exposure meter. It is only a reference. Instead, I use zebra and the histogram. I usually set my zebra to 75 when filming people because it gives me a reliable reference for skin tones. I also keep an eye on the histogram. The left side represents shadows, while the right side represents highlights. A good exposure doesn't mean the graph has to sit perfectly in the middle. Different scenes will naturally look different. The key is ensuring that the data is not heavily clipping on either side. Another mistake I used to make was ignoring the relationship between frame rate and shutter speed. It took me a while to realize that shutter speed is not just an exposure setting. It also affects how motion is recorded. A simple rule I follow now is keeping my shutter speed roughly double my frame rate. So, if I am shooting at 24 frames per second, I use 1/50. The challenge comes when filming outside. Bright sunlight gives you two choices: increase the shutter speed and ruin the natural motion blur, or find another way to control the light. That is where ND filters changed everything for me. I have been using the Freewell hybrid ND filter, and it quickly became a part of my filmmaking setup. It offers a 3 to 7 stop variable range, giving me plenty of flexibility when filming outdoors. Instead of changing my shutter speed every time the light gets brighter, I can simply adjust the filter and keep my settings consistent. One thing I really like is the magnetic system. It snaps into place in seconds, making it easy to switch filters. What makes it even more useful is that it combines both ND and a CPL. Along with controlling light, the CPL helps reduce unwanted reflections from surfaces like glass and water. I also like the true color design because it helps maintain a natural looking image and keeps colors consistent while filming. What this taught me is that the more control you have during filming, the easier it becomes to create exactly what you imagined. If you are interested in this filter, you can find the link in the description below. One habit that quietly slowed down my progress was filming without a clear plan. Sometimes I ended up with a lot of footage, but very little that actually worked together. Now, before I start shooting, I spend a few hours thinking about the story I want to tell. I visualize the sequence, imagine how one shot will connect to the next, and make a rough list of the shots I need. It helps me avoid shooting unnecessary footage, saves camera battery, speeds up the editing process, and most importantly, it helps me understand exactly what I am trying to create. Composition was another thing I completely underestimated. One of the easiest ways to improve a shot is by creating depth. Instead of placing your subject against a plain background, try separating them from the background. I also started paying more attention to foreground elements. Sometimes something as simple as a plant, a door frame, or any object placed close to the lens can add another layer to the image. Because it is out of focus, it naturally draws more attention to the subject, while making the frame feel more immersive. Instead of always shooting everything from eye level, I started experimenting with different angles. A low angle can make a subject feel more powerful. A high angle can make them feel more isolated. A Dutch angle can introduce tension or make a moment feel slightly unsettling. Sometimes, changing the angle by just a few inches can completely change how a shot feels. The last mistake was probably the one that held me back the most. Chasing perfection. Looking back, every improvement I talked about in this video came from doing something wrong first and learning from it later. So do not be afraid of making mistakes. The goal is not to create something perfect. The goal is to create something, learn from it, and make the next one better. Because the difference between the filmmaker you are today and the filmmaker you want to become is often just a few mistakes you have not learned from yet.